Welcome to Massive Passive Cash Flow, the podcast that guides professionals to financial prosperity. Join our community and let's start building your wealth. Here's your host, Gary Wilson.
Welcome back to the Massive Passive Cash Flow podcast. I'm Gary Wilson, your host, and I'm glad to have you back. We got a great guest today, Derek Mazzarella, who's going to talk to us about retirement planning, and things you can do now, regardless of your age. I mean, I know if listeners here, some of you are probably in your 20s and 30s, and some in your 50s and 60s, and possibly older. And just have heart and have faith. You can always do something. So just take notes. If you're driving, don't take notes. Just listen, and later on you can re-listen and take notes then. And so let's go ahead and get this started, Derek. First off, I appreciate you doing this. Such a timely, necessary subject, and it doesn't matter if we're employees or independent contractors or real estate investors or even real estate agents. You have to think about retirement. You have to take action on that. So if you could, before we get into the meat and potatoes, would you mind sharing with us how you got to where you are now? Did you start off in another industry and then realize there's a great need and this is how this came about? Or tell us about that if you don't mind.
Absolutely. Well, I went to Bryant University, which is a business school, and my initial thought is I would get into some sort of consulting with, like Bain or one of the big firms. I had absolutely zero luck with that. And I was at a job fair and I ran into this woman who worked for Aflac, and she said, "Hey, look, you can run your own business." And I kind of had always wanted to do something along that. You make as much money as you want. And as a precocious 21-year-old, I was like, absolutely, I'm all in. So my first job out of college was working with Aflac. I was pounding phones and basically just trying to work with small businesses and try and get them a layer of supplemental insurance on their practice. Then flash forward, 2008 happens. There was obviously a lot of layoffs. Basically, a third of my book was gone because most employees did not choose to keep that. So after a year and a half of working, you lose a third of what you worked for. It was really challenging, humbling. But I had been networking with a financial advisor for that year and a half, and he just moved to a management position. So he said, "Hey, look, we're looking for advisors. I think you'd be a great fit." I always had a real interest in the finance space, even going back to college. I'd always read about it, and it was a real passion of mine. So I thought, worst case scenario, if I fail at this, I can learn some stuff that I can apply hopefully to my own life. And then basically starting in 2009, right at the market bottom, I joined the financial industry, and I've been working as a financial advisor ever since.
Nice. Well, what's interesting is Aflac is known, even outside the industry of insurance, is known for being a very good training platform. One of my old agents came from Aflac, and he was a rock star.
Yeah, well, it's hard. It's very hard. Back in the day, I was making a lot of cold calls. I'd make 150, 200 a day at times. You get rejected a ton, so it's really helpful to build that thick skin and not worry about what can happen to you, and say, "Hey, look, you got to move on," because that's how life works.
That's it. It's amazing once you get started in that, you realize, just because somebody says no, it's not the end of the world. You develop your layer of Teflon and let it just slide right off, and doesn't even phase you anymore.
Yeah, I think it's one thing that helped me reframe it was they're not saying no to you personally; they're saying no to your product.
Correct.
Right? If you have that mindset, then I think that'll carry you through and help you have that nice Teflon.
Yeah. Okay. So now here's what's really kind of poignant is. So you met with a financial advisor, got in with that business right at the beginning of the biggest economic downturn. At the time, it would have been, I guess, about 80 years. So,
Yeah.
layoffs. I mean, it was nuts. I remember clearly. It was just, I was so busy, I didn't really have time to think about the magnitude of what was going on at the time and how dangerously close we were to full-blown depression. I mean, we were literally right on the cusp, But tell us about what was that like when you're starting out? I'm sure a lot of your calls that you were making, people are like, "Man, I just lost my 401k, just got cut in half, or I lost my job, or I can't even make my house." Tell us about what that was like, getting started in that business sector at that time, because I think people realize how necessary it was for them to speak with you, but how ill prepared they felt under the circumstances. So take it from there if you don't mind.
Absolutely. Well, I think my biggest advantage was I knew nothing going into this, right? I had no experience. I didn't experience the market crash. I didn't lose any clients' money. So at that point, I was golden. But I think the one thing to your point is Not a lot of advisors, when the market crashes, will reach out proactively to their clients, which is a huge mistake, because that's the point when they're most scared. They're not sure what to do. They're not sure if you position them correctly. They want to make sure they're still on track for their goals. To your point, the market was down over 50%. So we had all those jokes going around those times. My 401k is now a 201k. So
Yeah.
that's the time when you really need to reach out to people. And as I was reaching out to people, you heard all of the stories like, well, I don't know if I was positioned correctly. A lot of what I was doing too is also reviewing their, life insurance policies to make sure those were impacted, and they were on track. That's a lot of the cold calls I actually was making, because they were relying on the market or relying on interest rates, which had dropped pretty significantly. So a lot of these things are interrelated. So I think just reaching out, having those conversations was challenging, but for those people that didn't have someone to talk to or walk them through, hey, this is how we get to the other side. That was incredibly valuable for those people.
Yeah. Well, whether it's 2008 or here we are in late 2023, um, what are, I guess, what are one or two things people can do? Um, People who are not fully prepared, what's one or two things they can do to help their situation right now?
Yeah, I think the first thing you should really always do is assess where you are today, right? Well, let's take a step back and figure, okay, am I on track for my goals? Am I on track for what I want to have? Where does my life look? And do I need to make changes? And for most people, that's true. So the biggest thing is figuring out, where you want to go. And I always talk about when you go on vacation, you don't get in your car and just start driving, right?
Mhm.
You plan, you're going to go to, a warm location, you're going to pack a different set of clothing than if you're going to go on a ski vacation. So you need to figure out where you're going first. I think that's always the first thing. And then, okay, what are the first few steps I need to get there? A lot of it just smaller things like, am I saving into my retirement plan? Am I getting the match, right? So most
Mhm.
people, you'd be surprised how many people actually don't save in their 401k plan and don't get the match. I mean, if
Yeah.
you just get the match, you're getting a 100% rate of return in most cases. If I
Yeah.
got that in the market every year for you, there'd be a statue out in front of me, right? Like it would be insane. I mean, you can't get 100% rate of return almost anywhere guaranteed, right? So
Yeah.
those are some of the things I would look at doing is just, start saving the 401k, make sure you get that match. Build up an emergency fund because markets like last year or 2 years ago happened where, hey, the markets drop. And if you had all your money in the market and you expected you needed access to that, you didn't have the money in cash to be available, for you. And the other thing is, when it comes to market drops, you always have to look at those as opportunities, not just in investing, but there's tax opportunities that most people never take advantage of. And I'll give you two examples.
Okay.
One is a Roth conversion. So most people don't know how money's taxed, but most people have money in a pre-tax account. So they save on taxes today, but they pay taxes later.
Mhm.
Roth is the opposite. You pay taxes today, and then you don't pay taxes later in retirement. What you can do is, let's say you had an account with 100,000 in it, just for easy math, it drops to 80,000. If you converted that, now you convert that at 80,000, you pay taxes on the 80,000 instead of the 100. You just pay taxes on $20,000 less of income. And then when the market rebounds, all of that growth is going to be tax free.
Okay.
Right. So that's one
Nice.
opportunity I always see in markets. Not saying you have to do the full account, but down markets are a great opportunity to typically do Roth conversions depending on your income. And the second piece is tax loss harvesting. So you can take
Mhm.
advantage of a drop in a stock and say, hey, look, I'm going to realize this loss, sell it. And then now you can write off your income in the future up to $3,000 a year.
Wow. Oh, so that loss you can carry forward, in other words.
Yeah. So let's say you capture $10,000 of losses. You can only
Mhm.
offset 3 in 1 year of your income, but you can
Ah,
carry the remaining 7,000 until you're basically use all of that up.
oh, that's awesome. Okay. I didn't realize that. So it really is not a time limit on it. As long as you use it up, you can, oh, that's a great one.
Right. And we don't
Yeah.
have down, thankfully, knock on wood, we don't have down years every single year in the market. So if there is a down year and you do have an opportunity to take advantage of a loss, that's how you can say, okay, well, I may offset in the future 15% capital gains, but my income's at a 32% bracket. Let's realize the 32%, advantage for that. So there's a lot of things you could do when it comes to tax planning for financial planning.
Okay. Well, let's look at the other side of the coin now. You probably come across people that have received financial advice from others. What is there some financial advice you've seen commonly given from other people that maybe we should be rethinking?
Yeah, I think the big thing that I constantly see is we're always told we have to save on taxes today. It's always look back exercise. Our CPAs and our tax accountants will say, all right, they get a gold star if they can show, hey, look, your tax bill was 10,000 this year, but I got you down to 5, right? And we're always happy with that. But we don't do a good job of projecting out what our taxes will be in the future. I'll give you an example I had with a client. So I have a client, one was a doctor, one was actually in the accounting field, and they're about 2 years away from retirement. And we looked at their tax projections. And one of the things I did was they had all their money in pre-tax bucket and they had some an investment account. They had no Roth dollars. So basically they wanted to take some money out in retirement. They're going to be taxed on it in some form. But what we did was we scheduled some Roth conversions throughout the first couple of years of their retirement. And as a result, we were able to show them about saving about $200,000 in taxes over their retirement by being strategic with when we made those conversions. So you want to have a kind of a tax balance, and that's a big mistake I see a lot of people making because they're kind of funneling everything into the pre-tax bucket when, tax rates are unpredictable. They are historically low right now. They're set to sunset in 3 years, so they're going to go up pretty much if nothing changes in 3 years anyway. Yeah. And we have a lot of debt. So you tell me, Gary, where you think the taxes are going in the next few years?
Did you know that you can participate in class every Monday? We call it Monday Night Live, 7 p.m. Eastern, with me and dozens of other investor agents from around the country, in fact, the world. Every Monday, totally free. No selling, no recruiting, just straight up education on anything and everything in real estate. And we have a lot of good guests coming on once or twice a month, bringing in expertise on subjects like how to buy a house with crypto. Okay. How about them apples? What about AI? How's AI affecting our business? How about the metaverse, blockchain processing? We're already using it in title work. So come on to Monday Night Live. Be ready to take notes and ask questions because it's live and engaging, and you get to participate by asking questions and meeting others. So we'll see you there. Go to realestatewithgarywilson.com. Click on the resource tab, drop down, and you'll see Monday Night Live. And in there, you can see one of the most recent classes. But more importantly, you can register for class as many as you want going up to like the end of the year, I believe. So in any case, do that. We'll see you on Monday Night Live. Look forward to meeting you in person. Take care. Yeah, I think we're going up.
Yeah.
I mean, it's funny. I will never claim to be a financial genius or an economics professor or any stretch of the imagination. But when you've been through this upcoming will be my 5th market cycle, and you learn over there some common denominators, common things that happen that influence the market. And one of those things is the Federal Reserve controlling interest rates. How good of a job are they doing controlling interest rates? Did they start raising them soon enough? Are they raising them too much? Things like that. Are they going too low? Did they lower them too low? Things like that. But another factor is the government's insatiable appetite for just printing money. I call it monopoly money because after Nixon took the US dollar off the gold standard, it says right on the dollar, at least they used to anyways, maybe they took it off, but it says backed by the full faith and credit of the United States government. I don't even know if that's printed anymore. But the problem is the people running the government, I'm not making any political statements here because they've all done it, is print too much money without having the actual backing of GDP to support it. They just print money to solve a problem. It's short term. It makes people feel good, but it just basically grows this long-term debt, this giant thing that at some point you got to pay the piper. I mean, I don't know if this is true, Derek, but I was in another podcast and I think somebody had done the calculation based on the current national debt, 30 something trillion, divided by the number of living, breathing American citizens, right? Mm-hmm. Each person has $100,000 price tag on their back in the United States right now, if that's true. So I haven't done the math on it, but I guess if you do the math on it, it works out roughly, there's 300 something million people in the United States that we know of. Yeah. And then there's 30 trillion in debt. I guess if you do the math on that, subtract some zeros, it comes out to $100,000. That's incredible. And what people don't realize is they're thinking, yeah, but that's not me. I didn't make that debt. I don't have to pay that back. Well, you do. You pay for it in the cost of products and services. You pay for it in taxes. You pay for it in inflation. Mm-hmm. Inflation is just another tax. When you think about inflation has to do with the printing of money, the abundance of money in the supply of money that results in higher prices, right? So people don't realize when the government prints money like that, it causes inflation. There's more dollars, right? Which makes the prices of products go up. So they do pay for it. That's what I want people to understand. So I'm going way down a rabbit hole here, but those are the walkers. We just don't know what the government's going to do. They'll promise us things, but it's so political. When they feel like they need to do something to win the next election, what do? We're going to lower interest rates. You know, we're going to make sure we bail you out, Mr. and Mrs. U.S. citizen. Whatever trouble you're in, don't worry, we're going to pay for it. That has a price tag with it. So in any case, Sean, let's talk about people who are at or near retirement age right now, since we're on the subject of doing a swaps between the 401k and the Roth. What is what are some common mistakes you see people make as they get near to retirement? I know people sometimes get anxious and maybe they don't make the best decisions. What are some of the common ones you see?
Yeah, I think it's there's definitely a few of them. One is not really mapping out Social Security. I mean, kind of to our previous conversation here about the government, especially a lot of younger folks I talk to will say, hey, look, I don't think it's going to be there. I mean, I personally think it still will be. I mean, I don't think we realize this, but back in the early 80s, we were in a very similar position and, we were able to make some tweaks with it. So, if you look at the voting block right now, it's mostly older people, and older folks rely heavily on Social Security for their income. So I don't think any side is going to, scorn that segment of the market.
Yeah.
So I would say having a real plan for taking it, because over 50% of the people take Social Security before age 65. And what happens with Social Security is your full retirement age for most people is going to be between 66 and 67. So that's when you collect 100% of your benefit. Anytime you collect it earlier, you're essentially losing 8% of that payment a year for the rest of your life. So not having a good decision tree with that, I think, is important, because most people think, hey, I want that money and I want it now. But if you're living to 81, typically to 83, you're better off typically waiting. So that's one thing I would say. Make sure you're making a real measured case for why you're taking it early, especially if you're working. Before you take it early, they're going to actually offset some of your earnings on Social Security if you're working. So that's something to be aware of too. So I see that mistake happen quite a bit. I think, and two, the biggest thing I see is portfolio positions usually way off. I think most people think, all right, I'm 65, 60-40 portfolio, 60% stock, 40% bonds. I'm good. Let's let it ride. But most people don't realize the riskiest years are actually the 5 years before and 5 years after you retire. Because let's say you retired in 2021, the stock market ripped up. 2022 happens, both stocks and bonds are down. Your portfolio is down 15 to 20%. So your $1 million account is now down to 800,000 right off the bat. And then take on top of that, you're pulling 4-5% out. The amount that you're gonna have to return to recover is going to be 25-30%. So now you have to get riskier just to get back. So positioning your portfolio correctly for retirement is really important. One of the things I typically recommend is something called a bucket strategy. That's where you have 2 years of your retirement expenses in cash, because if the market drops 20% or more, typically it takes about 20 months to recover. So this way you have about 2 years worth of cash. So, you're not freaking out, because what happens behaviorally is most people say, I'm going to pull money out and go to cash. Like right now we have records amount of cash in the market. So that prevents that piece of it. And then you have a midterm bucket that's, like 40 to 50% stock. And then you have your long-term bucket, which is going to be 70 to 80% stock, because you have to be, inflation and things of those nature. So positioning your portfolio correctly for retirement can really help put you in a good spot and not help you overreact to things that may happen in the market.
Yeah. Okay. I like it. And I agree. I know some people, they just don't pay attention. They think they're okay. They've been working at their job for decades and they're in their 60s and they're like, you know what, I'm doing pretty good. I got $1.5 million in there, and whatever those guys are doing is working for me. I don't want to mess with it. But they don't realize the risk. I mean, if if there is a major market correction, a lot of equities are going to go down. But if if they're in the, if the stocks we have, if a larger portion are in the bigger, better blue chip dividend paying stocks, and maybe some bonds, other things like that, but also utilities, things that people are always going to want and need, things like that. They're probably going to be safer. They might still experience some drop, but not as much as if they were totally in equities. But now let's go back earlier in time to people who are getting out of college. They're starting out. They're in their 20s, maybe in their 30s, because they realize they got married, had children. They need to also save for retirement as well as college education. What are some of the things that those folks that are further away from retirement can start to do and implement?
But yeah, the biggest challenge I see is they don't really have any system set up personally for their
Hmm.
finances. So the one thing I always tell, especially younger folks, is think of a champagne tower, right? So the first thing you should do is fill up your emergency fund. So fill that first cup up. And then once you have that cup filled up, all right, let's get to your savings. Then you fill that up. Let's get to the next level, right? So to keep it simple, you want to automate your savings. So I kind of have a reverse thing because most people tend to do paycheck, expenses, anything's left over. Cool, I'm going to save that into my bank account. What should happen is you say, okay, here's my income. I know I have my fixed expenses. So, pay your rent every month, pay your mortgages, pay all that stuff, allocate that. Then you want to say, okay, I'm going to put money in my 401k or retirement plan. I'm going to put some money in my investment account and I'm going to put some money in my emergency fund. And what you want to do with all those three things is retirement, you want to allocate because we know we're going to retire at some point. We want to get that match if it's available, and we want to get the favorable tax treatment of that. The investment account you want to set up because you may want to, maybe you decide to do real estate at some point and you want to have a bucket of money that's there that you can access relatively easily. And that's what an investment account can do for you. So if you just say, okay, out of my check, I'm going to have, 5% going to the 401k, 5% going to my investment account, 5% to the emergency fund until that's filled up. Then I'll switch that to, 10 and 5 or whatever mix. But just automate that. And then what happens is you're free to spend the rest. So get as many Starbucks coffees as you want. I don't care what Dave Ramsey says, because when you have your goals aligned and you have money going on track automatically, that's when you have the freedom to spend. And that's when I see clients be less stressed about their spending habits.
Yeah. Okay. All right. That helps a lot. I know when I first started out, I mentioned earlier, I was single, had my first professional job, and the 401k was not that old. This was, 1985, so it was still relatively new. And I remember thinking to myself, my gosh, if I put in 6%, they'll match me 6%, and then all of that still gets invested for greater gains. And if you think about 1986, there was the Tax Reform Act of 1986. It changed things for people. It took away a lot of loopholes for professional people who are self-employed, had their own practices and so forth. And in the next year, of course, I think they called it Black Monday. It was in October of 87. That was a year later. So in the beginning, I didn't get worried, but I really wasn't making anything. But what was happening was I was accumulating, more shares through the mutual funds and stocks, more shares in lower prices. And what's really cool is my next job was with a major bank. And every day at lunch, I would go up to the corporate library. I don't even know if they do this anymore. I don't know if these corporations have corporate libraries. I would go to the corporate library with my brown bag lunch and study the periodicals and look at like Morningstar and
Mhm.
things like that and read Barron's and Fortune. And I realized, man, I'm actually doing really well. And then from those years forward, I was making 20% for a while,
Yeah.
And then I started another fund that wasn't a retirement fund. It was just basically, I don't know if you call it play money, but money I was saving up to do other things with. In a few short years, I was in Fidelity Magellan, had like $50,000 there. And I was basically still a kid. And that's what I used to start buying real estate. Um, but the common theme there, and thankfully I got this from my father's side of the family, is I lived well within my means. A lot of my friends were just buying stuff. I mean, cars, houses, but I bought a house too, but I bought it with a roommate, college roommate, Socrates, and we bought a house together in 4-bedroom ranch. We rented out the other 2 rooms to 2 other guys whose rent payments covered all of our monthly expenses, short of about $50 each. So I'm living, very frugally, saving a ton of money. Thank goodness I did, because later on when I got married and had kids, a lot of that expendable money I had was no longer there because it was going out
Right.
to braces and
Yeah.
doctor's appointments and clothes and parties and sporting and all this stuff, and all fun. Believe me, I'm glad I did it. Had a lot of fun, but I'm really glad I started investing and saving early. I didn't wait. Like people told me, why don't you just wait? You're just a kid. I'm like, oh, by the way, this is a great lesson. I took accounting in college, two semesters of accounting, and one of the books I had in the back had a table I don't even know what you call this table, but it showed you the results of saving, like if you compound,
Mhm.
so you could see a period of 30 years and you start off with a certain amount, then you have a monthly, you pay into it monthly, $100 a month or something. And it had different rates of returns over those 30 years. You could pick, I'm going to average 10%, I'm going to average 5%, 15%. And man, what a huge difference if you just start now and let compounding work for you. You might think you don't have 30 years, but you know what? If you're 60 years old right now, there's a really good shot you'll make it to 90. That's 30 years.
Yeah. It's true.
You know,
Yeah.
so
Very
do you
true.
have any examples or case studies? I mean, I'm just one person, and I believe me, I've made as many mistakes as I've made good decisions. But anything you can share, case study wise, example wise, as long as you're change your names, protect the innocent. But maybe one where somebody probably waited way too long to start, or got wiped out in the last recession and started
Mhm.
over, and another one where somebody did start early and now they're looking pretty. So
Sure. Well, let me see if I can pull that up. Well, let me give you one quick tip. So,
yep,
to your compounding question, most people have never actually heard of the rule of 72. I don't know, Gary, if you've heard of this at all. But basically, it takes like what does it actually take for your money to double? And you can either divide it by a number of years. So let's say I want my money to double every 10 years. You divide 72 by 10, that's 7.2%. And it works the opposite way. So if you're earning, stock market earns on average about 9 to 10% a year. So that means your money's going to double every 7 to 8 years or so, depending on what you get. So that's going to show how much wealth can accumulate over time. And I guess I'll give you two kind of ends in the case study. I've been working long enough where I've had someone that I've started at 21 and now they're 65. So I don't have that particular case study from when I started, but I do have some people that I know have started younger and how it's impacted them.
okay,
But I think my biggest challenge was I met with a client who was 62 at the time, and she had $10,000 saved. Now I feel like I'm pretty good at my job, but there was
yep,
no way I could help her retire, and she wanted to retire in 2 years. There was no way I could have helped her retire in 2 years. There's just nothing we
yeah,
could have done. So I don't want you to be that person at all, right? So even saving a little bit over time is going to help you. So that's probably the extreme case. But on the other side, I had a client. She's 63 now, so she's
mhm,
2 years away, but she saved a little bit every year, starting when she was really young. And then that just compounded and compounded, and then she put herself in a really good spot. Now the only thing we have to do is tweak, the tax piece of it. We have to tweak some small things. So just starting right away really helped her out. And she wasn't someone that made a ton of money. I think her average salary was something like $50,000 to $60,000 a year for a while there.
yeah,
If you just chip away at it, you'd be surprised how far it can go if you're younger.
yeah,
I had a chart a while back said like, yeah, I think you had to save about $380 a month if you're 25 years old to get $1 million
mhm,
by 65. But if you wait until 55, you're saving basically over $5,000 a month. So think about the differences. I think most people maybe can't sock away $300 at 25, but can you do 15? Can you do 20? Can you do 50? I mean, that's one less beer a week at the bar, right? So that's,
yeah,
there's definitely ways you can think about it, especially if you just graduated college, you're probably used to that ramen lifestyle. Just keep that going for a little bit. You'd be amazed what happens, and try not to compare yourself with others. I think that's when people get in traps because cars are expensive and they don't provide the value that you would think they would.
right. Oh yeah, everything's gone up in the last several years. Remember in the pandemic years, the cost of everything was going crazy, particularly cars. I mean, people started going to the used car market because they couldn't get the new cars. Because of supply chain problems, we weren't getting the computer chips from China, and so the used car prices had gone through the roof. Now, I'm my family typically calls me Mr. Frugal, so I drive a really nice Lincoln,
Yeah.
but I didn't buy it new. I bought it, get this, the first week of January 2020, before anything started. And
Yeah.
I think I paid 24,000 after all the fees and taxes for essentially a 2-year-old car that only had 20 something thousand miles on it. It has everything, all the bells and whistles,
Yeah.
heated seats, cooled seats, sunroof, the whole 9 yards, turbocharged. Well, 2 years later, the parents of a friend of mine really liked my Lincoln. They went to go buy one. They bought one that was 2 years old. Now, granted, it was 2 years older, 2 years newer than mine, but essentially still 2 years old. They paid twice what I paid for the same car,
Wow. Yeah.
used car.
The timing does
Yep.
help. But I always try and buy cars, 1 or 2 years after the lease is up when you have
Yeah.
the 10 to 20,000 miles, because I think that's where you get the most blended value. But I had a client tell me last year she bought a Mercedes. She's spending $681 a month. Now she makes decent money, but it's still a pretty
Yeah.
big anchor on her finances and her cash flow. And she's like, it was something I always thought I wanted. I was like, I worked my whole life. She's about to retire in a couple of years, and she said, I'm buying this car. This is my gift. I've been doing stuff for my kids my whole life. And she goes, well, you know what? Now that I have it, I don't get $681 of joy a month out of it. And I think one of the conversations I try and have with clients, like, is this in line with your core value? Is this going to really provide joy? Is this something really important? Because for someone that may actually be really important, but for her it wasn't. And I think it's important that you know the difference and you invest your money accordingly.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I know we're getting short on time here. But for people that are interested in learning more about you and what you do, what's the best thing? How can we serve them? What can we give them to help them get in touch with you, or maybe get them some information, like a book or something like that,
Yep. So I actually recently published a book back in October. It's called Just Retire Already, an unconventional retirement guide. So it's a retirement guide. It could be for younger or older folks if you're just on the cusp or thinking about where life is going. I use analogies and jokes and stories to make it really simple and easy to understand. So it should be kind of a beachy read, if you will.
Okay.
So you can go to justretirealready.com. You'll find more information on the book. There'll be a sample chapter you can download as well. And I'm also very active on LinkedIn. So I'm posting 5 days a week on there. So I usually have some financial quick tips or tidbits or some deeper dives that I go into. So feel free to follow me there. The last thing you do is you can simply reach out to me or email me. All my information will be on justretirealready.com. So feel free to find me there.
Okay. Justretirealready.com. And the link, your LinkedIn, I guess handle they call it. Is it your name, Derek Mazzarella, or is it
Just Derek Mazzarella. Yep.
Okay. So everybody listening, again, please don't try to write this down while you're driving. Just put this back in when you get home. So it's Derek with one R, Derek, and Mazzarella's Mazz, two Z's, Arella. Okay. So in any case, hey Derek, I really appreciate you doing this. You gave a lot of content in a short period of time, so we really appreciate you doing that. We get the best reviews. Oh, speaking of reviews, if you're listening out there, please remember, if you can leave a review for the podcast, it does wonders for people like Derek and I. We do this as a community service. Mm-hmm. There's nothing here to buy or pitch or recruit. It's just good old fashioned education and information, and we love to do it. It's network building at its finest. So if you can leave a review, we really do appreciate you doing it. It means the world to us. And while you're out there, go to LinkedIn, look up Derek Mazzarella, and also, most of all, look for the book, Just Retire Already, right? Go to the website, justretirealready.com, get a free chapter, and then you can get the whole thing on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and so forth. And the last thing you do before you leave the internet is go visit globalinvestoragent.com. If you are an investor, this is where you find real estate agents who are trained to work with you. These are not typical agents, and they're in 38 states. And if you are an agent, a real estate agent right now, there's no better time to learn how to make this part of your model, right? And I talked to Derek before this. He actually owns a piece of real estate.
I do.
So you'd be amazed at how many people do. I mean, just how'd you like to work with a guy like Derek? He's your client, who's a certified financial planner. Couldn't get any better than that, guys. So if you're an agent, I mean, I really encourage you to. I got my license years ago at a desperation because I wasn't getting what I needed from the agents in the world of investing. And we solved that by training the agents how to work with us investors. So they know everything they need to know to help you. Terminology, methodology, tools, strategies. They know how to get the deals on and off market, which is a big deal. So anyways, enough of that. Derek, thanks again, man. Any final words of wisdom or a piece of like a golden nugget you remember from your granddad, for example?
That's a good one, Gary. Well, my dad always said, now we just talked about this, but cars are an expense, not an asset. So that's one thing I've always kind of kept with me. But my big advice is just start. If it's small, that's better than nothing. So just start.
You got it. I love it. Hey, there's a famous saying in the Scouts, from tiny acorns grow mighty oaks. You know?
So, yeah, be surprised.
You got it. So listen, everyone, thank you again for participating and listening. Thank you again, Derek. God bless all of you and your families, and have a Merry Christmas. We will see you on the next Massive Passive Cash Flow podcast.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Massive Passive Cash Flow. Be sure to go to realestatewithgarywilson.com to join our community and start building wealth today.